Hi, I'm Micah Halpern. Thank you for joining me today as I do some thinking out loud. Our first segment is called Background Briefing. The first thing I've been thinking about is the conflict between Russia and Turkey. It is just going to get worse. Turkey has told the Reuters news agency that Russia has stopped work on their nuclear power plants. In reality, the Turks are exaggerating. The Russians haven't really stopped. They've only slowed down. It's another piece in the intensifying conflict that has enveloped Russia and Turkey over the downing of a Russian Au-24 slow-moving bomber by a Turkish F-16 fighter jet. The nuclear deal began in 2013. The Turks promised to pay $20 billion, and the Russian nuclear company Rosatom promised to build 4 1,200-megawatt nuclear electrical power plants in Turkey. The first plant was actually scheduled to open in 2019. But from the very outset, things have not run on schedule. One reason is that the project confronted international regulatory problems. That happens all the time. The Russians have done this before, though, only with Iran. They slowed down on the original proposal with Iran. Iran took the Russians to the World Court and sued them because the Iranians really wanted their nuclear power plants. Now, because of their experience with Iran, Russia realizes that stopping entirely would be very costly. Huge disincentives and penalties are built into the contract, and Turkey has already started shopping around for someone else to finish the nuclear job. Well, good luck there. Because here's the crux of the problem, and why Turkey can never win in this conflict with Russia. Turkey is almost totally dependent on imported energy. They have been counting on these nuclear plants and should be conducting backdoor diplomatic negotiations to resurrect the deal and put it back on schedule. But they do not appear to be doing that at all. Tensions between the Turks and the Russians do not at all seem to be dissipating. Actually, they're increasing. So much so that Russia has also stopped importing Turkish fruits and vegetables. The reason that the Russians have given is that the Turks have poor sanitation and hygiene on their vegetables. But the real reason is because the jet shot down the bomber. This isn't just a case of no more Turkish pistachio nuts and dates. Turkish fruits and vegetables account for 20% of the Russian total fruit and vegetable consumption. This is a huge loss to the Turkish economy, a $4 billion annual loss in fruit and vegetable revenue. Russia has said that they will easily make up the loss by importing from Iran and, yes, Israel. There's more. Russia has also canceled all junkets, all the expense-included holiday vacation trips that Russians make every year to Turkey. The complete numbers tell a completely different story. Look at this. Last year, 3.3 million Russians vacationed in Turkey. That was 10% of all the tourists that visited Turkey. For Russia, however, it's very, very nice, a pleasant vacation. These vacations are not essential. They will find someplace else to fill their vacation needs. Turkey, however, will not find 3.3 million other tourists to come and visit. Russians love to escape their cold winters. Turkish resorts offer great deals that included charter flights and hotels, even transportation from the hotel in Turkey to the airport. This is a devastating blow to Turkish tourism industries and to their economy in general. Also taken off the agenda for Russian vacationers are the chartered, all-inclusive trips to the Sinai. ISIS took care of that when they blew up a Russian vacation charter jet, killing 224 people. Sinai was another perfect place for Russians to vacation during the cold winter. And again, the hotels in the Sinai were luxurious and inexpensive. One night in a 5-star hotel in Jerusalem was the cost of an entire week in the Sinai or in Turkey. Russians want to punish Turkey. That should be very clear. And Vladimir Putin definitely has the ability to make things difficult for Turkey. The balance of trade is pretty clear also. Look at this. Russia purchases 30 billion in goods from Turkey every year. And all those services are easily replaced elsewhere. But Turkey relies on Russia for $20 billion worth of natural gas every year. If that flow is even slightly altered, even for a single day, Turkey will grind to a halt. That natural gas engines Turkey's electric grid. Gas is next. Russia will start pulling it. They have already canceled work on an underwater gas pipeline, which together with the nuclear electric plants that I was talking about, would eventually make Turkey more energy independent. Turkey cannot get that gas replaced. They're in public conflict with not only with Russia, but with many other alternative suppliers. They supported, let's say, the Muslim Brotherhood. So Egypt will not supply them because of that. They've been aggressively critical of Saudi Arabia. So they will not supply them. And there's always Israel. But Israel could, but potentially, of course, if they wanted to, help Turkey's natural gas needs. But Turkey has been openly hostile to Israel. So no gas coming from Israel. Russian Minister of Agriculture has said, quote, Allah has already decided to punish Turkey's ruling clique, depriving them of mind and reason, unquote. For their part, Turkey is counting on the help of the EU and the general disdain that almost everyone has for Putin and his style of leadership, especially in the aftermath of Russia's land grab in Crimea and their invasion of Ukraine. Yet Turkey is misreading the situation and world involvement. Just because the world pays lip service and makes statements about Putin and Russia does not mean that that will translate into action. This is the case even in the Middle East. Russia walked into Syria, set up a huge Air Force base, and established a significant presence. The West warned the Russians not to enter and not to put boots on the ground. The U.S. was very clear about it. But Russia went in anyway, and their actions were met with only a few tepid condemnations. Even when the Turkish F-16 shot down an Su-24 Russian bomber, that's when international voices could have been raised. They could have been raised much higher. And they were raised to urge calm and de-escalate tensions, not to blame Russia. Turkey is overplaying their hand. They think that because there are UN sanctions against Russia, there is a way to leverage that power and squeeze Russia. If the world stood by when Russian military pranced into Ukraine and took over Crimea, how can Turkey even expect them to act now? Russia will get away with everything, and despite pressure that Turkey wants to apply, the real pressure will be placed by Russia on Turkey. No one is willing to step forward and help Turkey. If this continues, Russia will destroy them. It's also important to speak about the internet and how it can be used as a tool of terror, and most importantly, how to combat terror on the internet. Have you ever heard of mud? Not the dirty, wet sludge that we dread when it comes in on our kids' clothes or on our shoes. Mud is actually a method of attacking the web, especially social media. Israel is one of the world's leaders in understanding the internet and hacking. So why has Israel permitted such anti-Israel vitriol on the World Wide Web? They could easily take it down. Why have they let it go on? MUD stands for 3 words: monitor, use, and destroy. This is how MUD works. First, you monitor. Watch the websites. That's what monitoring is all about, just watching. After you watch all the websites and detect what is happening in the World Wide Web, you have your hackers use the site and try to manipulate the site through the use of outsiders. This second level of interaction tries to influence content through the users. That's the use part. This can backfire on you, and you never know what can happen when you use and try to influence a website itself. It seldom goes as planned. Then finally, there's the D, destroy. The last step is to destroy the site, to flood it, to bring it down, to take it down in other ways. The problem with just bringing down a site is that in a matter of a short period of time, sometimes hours, the site will be resurrected elsewhere in a matter of a few moments, certainly in days. Shutting down a site is not the best way to stop a message. They pop up again too quickly. The concept of using and manipulating a site through its existing users is at great risk. There is no way of knowing what will happen. That leaves us really with just monitoring the sites as the best method of dealing with anti-Semitism and the terrorists. Israel can easily bring down these sites, but the best way to really deal with these sites is to monitor them and nothing more. Coming up next, points of view. Here's what some important voices have been talking about. First up is a column from Le Monde. Le Monde is the largest distribution paper in France. This column is from their English edition. It's a column by Ira Chernus, and it was actually originally in the Tom Dispatch. Chernus is a regular in the Tom Dispatch. He was a professor of religious studies at the University of Colorado in Boulder, and he's the author of the online Mythic America essays. He blogs at Mythic America, and that's really who he is. It was originally published in Tom Dispatch, which is a project of the Nation Institute, which builds itself, by the way, as its banner name, a regular antidote to the mainstream media. Tom Dispatch is the creation of Tom Engelhardt. It's a post that brings together some very important minds. This is an interesting example. This piece by Ira Chernus is entitled America's Reckless War Against Evil: Why It's Self-Defeating and Has No End. It was originally published on December 8th, 2015, and then in Le Monde on December 10th. The piece has made its rounds and has a creative and important point to make. His point is, you cannot engage in a war against evil. Chernus begins by showing us how ridiculous it is to fight against evil. He writes, quote, "Oh no, not another American war against evil. This time, it's the Islamic State. After the attacks in Paris, Barack Obama's spokesman-in-chief for the United States of America called that crew the face of evil. Shades of George W. Bush, the evildoers are back. And from every mountaintop, it seems, America now rings with calls to ramp up its war machine." By the way, George W., how did that last war against the evildoers work out for you? Not quite the way you expected, right? I bet you didn't imagine that your global war on terror would plant the seeds of an Islamic State and turn significant stretches of Iraq and Syria into fertile soil in which IS would grow into a brand new, even more frightening enemy. But that's the way wars against evil always seem to work. Chernus has a point, that it's hard to fight against an idea. Chernus then shows 6 major reasons why it's impossible to fight evil. He explains that we turn the enemy into an evil force, and that must be eradicated. He then concludes that there must be another way. He writes, "National myths are, however, invented by human beings, and we are always capable of changing our minds. Who knows? Maybe someday the Islamic State will figure out that the brutal killing and other acts of horror in the name of the caliphate are not such a good idea after all. And maybe the United States will figure out that depending on an eternal, self-defeating war against evil for our national identity is a huge mistake after all. Maybe." I appreciate Chernus's point of view, but in the world of politics, and especially in America, galvanizing support to confront a concept that is amorphous will be nearly impossible. So leaders rely on the easiest method: turn the enemy into the devil, into evil. They believe that maybe there is a chance then that in the battle of good versus evil and the powers of light versus the powers of darkness, people might get motivated to act. Second up is an editorial from USA Today. It's entitled, "Anti-Muslim Bigotry Aids ISIL, Our View," the editorial board. It was published on December 9th, 2015. The subtitle actually is "America Stands Against Guilt by Association." Remember, editorials are unsigned, and they are the view of the editorial board. This section of the paper in USA Today attempts to make that clear, that ideas are important to discuss, and they are different than the news itself. USA Today always runs this disclaimer under its editorials. USA Today's editorial opinions are decided by its editorial board, separate from the news staff. Most editorials are coupled with an opposing view, a unique USA Today feature. Here's how the editorial begins. 6 days after the 9/11 attacks by Islamic extremists claimed the lives of nearly 3,000 Americans, President George W. Bush made a singular statement. He visited a mosque in the nation's capital. The image of Bush's strong stand against harassment and hatred, seen around the world, was a proud moment for the grieving nation, one that undoubtedly headed off an even uglier backlash. Bush wasn't being politically correct. He was upholding the nation's values and protecting its security. America is far safer in the battle against Islamic extremism, is focused not on the world's 1.6 billion Muslims, but the tiny fraction who become radicalized. In the aftermath of the recent attacks in Paris and San Bernardino, California, a dose of that sort of statesmanship is needed as an antidote to escalating bigotry against Muslims living in the U.S., and as a reminder that America stands against guilt by association. This editorial goes on to say bigotry is wrong, and there is no excuse and no justification. The editors then conclude saying the following: more need to remind Americans that bigotry will only be exploited by ISIL in its effort to provoke an apocalyptic showdown between Islam and the West. More need to stand up and demonstrate that Muslim Americans are indeed our friends, our neighbors, our co-workers, and our military service members. Better yet, show up at a mosque, as President Bush did, and show the world what tolerance and unity really look like. The editors are correct. The president and the presidential candidates should all go to mosques and speak. They should make certain that Muslims know that they are part of this great country. They should not feel alienated, but most importantly, they need to be co-opted to help solve the problem of Muslim terror. That cannot happen by further alienating the Muslim community. Coming up, commentary through cartoons, where pictures tell the story. Today I want to discuss 3 cartoons. The first is by Bob Gorrell. It was published on December 11, 2015. Gorrell is part of Creator Syndicate. The cartoon is entitled Official Revised Obama Terror Alert System. On one side of the title is the presidential seal. On the other side of the title is the TSA seal, the Transportation Security Administration seal, which is a branch of Homeland Security. There are 4 levels of the system, and each has a color. Level 1 is green and reads, ISIS is the JV team. Level 2 is blue and reads, ISIS is contained. Level 3 is orange and reads, ISIS is not an existential threat. And level 4 is, of course, red, and it reads, oh. And then that series of ubiquitous symbols that normally means that someone's cursing. Gorrell is making fun of Obama and the administration and his U.S. advisors. He's saying that over the past 2 years, they've consistently gotten the entire ISIL, IS thing wrong. And unfortunately, he's saying we're in level 4, in red. The second cartoon is by Jimmy Margolis. It was published on December 7th. Margolis is part of the North American Syndicate. There are 2 panels in this cartoon. The first panel is the Pentagon, and the balloon reads, we're opening all combat positions to women. The second panel is an ISIS man, and his balloon reads, us too. The ISIS man is holding up a paper, and the headline in the picture reads, San Bernardino Terror. This is a very sad but very funny commentary. Making the parallel between our Western sense of equality and ISIS is obviously incorrect, but the situation where women become terrorists does have an uncanny parallel. The last cartoon is by Clay Jones, and it was published in Clay Toons on December 1st, 2015. The colorful cartoon has a couple in the middle, both on all fours. All around them are American-looking people shooting their guns in all directions. The balloon has the husband saying to the wife, but Syrian refugees might be dangerous, unquote. The obvious point is that homegrown Americans have perpetrated far too many senseless deaths through shooting rampages. In a moment, my own perspective and a few predictions. Germany is putting a 93-year-old man named Reinhold Hanning on trial. Henning is charged with 170,000 counts of accessory to murder. Reinhold was an SS guard in Auschwitz. The trial will begin in February and will probably be one of the last Nazi trials. We will watch it carefully. The case will only be heard in 2-hour daily doses because of Henning's age and health. Henning admits that he was a guard in Auschwitz, but Auschwitz I. Auschwitz I was a prison, not a death camp. He claims that he was not in Birkenau, also known as Auschwitz II, which was where 1.1 million Jews were murdered by the Nazis. The Germans will also be following the case very closely. They need to teach the lesson that evil is evil, and it doesn't matter how old Henning is now, what was done was wrong. He might be the last Nazi. This is one of those stories that are just frightening. Not in a way that's horrid, but in a moral sense. Here it is. How can people do this kind of thing? 4,000 dolls were confiscated in the Haifa port. The dolls were packed and labeled as clothing, carpets, and plastic. Male dolls wore scarves, emblazoned with a picture of the Al-Aqsa shrine. Writing on the scarf read, "Jerusalem, we are coming," and "We are Jerusalem." The heads of the dolls were wrapped in a black and white keffiyeh. Only the eyes were visible. Each doll's hand clenched a rock, and the arm was raised and cocked as if to throw a rock. Inspectors stopped the dolls at the port because there was obviously no doubt that the dolls were a tool for incitement and hatred. Authorities termed the dolls inciting dolls. Thousands of containers enter Haifa every day, and there's no way to check them all. The inspectors profile each container. This container came from the United Arab Emirates and seemed suspicious, so it was x-rayed and the dolls were discovered. This is a really, really large treasure trove, a toy chest. The Vatican's Commission on Religious Relations with Jews released an official statement the other day, which is now the official policy of the Catholic Church and is endorsed by the Pope. The new policy is very clear. Do not convert Jews. The statement reads, quote, "The Church is therefore obliged to view evangelization to Jews who believe in one God in a different manner from that to people of other religions and worldviews." The Church is asking Catholics to do all that is possible with our Jewish friends to repel anti-Semitic tendencies. A Christian can never be an anti-Semite, especially because of the Jewish roots of Christianity. The document called on Catholics to, quote, "bear witness to their faith in Jesus Christ also to Jews," but that they should do so in a humble and sensitive manner, acknowledging that Jews are bearers of God's word. This is the direct statement of the Church. This is unbelievable. They are saying, hands off the Jews. Don't convert them. This is a follow-up of Vatican II, which was made very clear that Jews today were not responsible for the death of Jesus. This is a new statement, that Judaism is not some pagan, not some foreign tradition. Instead, it's saying that Judaism is the original tradition upon which Christianity is based. And it is saying that Jesus was unequivocally a Jew. The Vatican has taken a major step forward with this. This story, coming up, sounds almost like I made it up, but it is not made up. It actually touches on essential differences between Iran and Israel. A 30-year-old gay Iranian poet named Payam Feli escaped Iran and is now in Israel, where he wants to stay. Feli is the author of 9 books, many other works, including a novella which was made into a play and is now being performed in Tel Aviv. It is entitled, "I Will Grow, I Will Bear Fruit, Figs." Feli came to Tel Aviv to see his play performed. The Iranian police have arrested Feli in the past 3 times over 4 years. His charge for most of the arrests was being gay. He fled Iran because he said it was too much. During his last arrest, Feli was held for 44 days without being charged. He was blindfolded and kept in a shipping container. The reason for that arrest was agreeing to have his book translated into Hebrew and sold in Israel. Human rights groups say that over the last few years, 4,000 people have been executed in Iran for being gay. Feli has been fascinated by Israel since he was a kid, and Tel Aviv is a very open city and is one of the most gay-friendly cities in the world. It is constantly garnering top positions as a popular mecca for gay culture. Feli is happy to be in Israel, and during an interview he said, "All the stupid and ridiculous threats the regime issues against Israel have never influenced me and will never influence me. Iran and Israel are arch enemies. Iran has pledged to wipe Israel off the map, and Iranian leaders often call Israel a cancer. Feli is proving a point. He escaped the restrictions and the rigidity and oppression of Iran and is seeking refuge and freedom to be who he is in Israel. This is one of the great stories where evil is evil and good is good." We've been thinking out loud about a lot today. Now that you know what I've been thinking, let me know what you're thinking. Email me at micah@jbstv.org. Tweet me at Micah Halpern. Tell me what you think. Before we end, let me leave you with one piquante piece of information. We spoke about hacking and how to use the internet to fight terror like mud. Did you know that the WWW actually stands for the World Wide Web? It was not created by Al Gore. The World Wide Web is an open source communication system. It was actually created by an English scientist named Tim Berners-Lee. The idea came about in 1989. He wrote the first browser in 1990, and it was officially opened on August 6, 1991. Stanford had the first browser in the US, and as of 1992, that was the first browser outside of Europe. It's hard to believe what has happened in the 20-plus years since this new invention of the WWW, the World Wide Web, came into our lives. Thank you for thinking out loud with me, Micah Halpern. Let's think out loud again next week on JBS.
We would be pleased to send a complimentary DVD of this program to anyone who wishes to support JBS, the Jewish Broadcasting Service, with a tax-deductible gift of $36, double chai or more, to the nonprofit organization Jewish Education in Media. Simply visit the JBS homepage and click on the Donate button to make a donation by PayPal or your credit card. And please indicate the program for which you would like a DVD. Or you can send your tax-deductible check made out to Jim, Post Office Box 180, Riverdale Station, Bronx, New York 10471. And again, please remember to indicate which program you would like to receive with our compliments. And we thank you for your kind support.